This is the Bardock theme. This is the kind of song that fills you with excitement. It's the kind of song that pumps you up. It's the kind of song that makes you want to face off against an evil space tyrant. But here's the thing, it's kind of a weird song, and originally it may not have even been intended to be Bardock's theme. So today we're going to be talking about that and more, because I'm going to be doing something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. An entire video about Solid State Scouter. So let's begin with the title, Solid State Scouter. What does that even mean? Well, obviously this song is inspired by the Scouters in Dragon Ball Z, so that's why you have Scouter in the title. But what about Solid State? Well, you see, the Solid State part of Solid State Scouter is a reference to the 1979 album Solid State Survivor. This was by the absolutely legendary Japanese electronic music group Yellow Magic Orchestra, aka YMO. But that's not the only YMO reference in this song. There's actually several more. So the next one comes right at the beginning of the song. You know how right when the song starts, you hear a robotic voice saying, Tokyo. 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 Well, in the song Technopolis, from that same album by YMO, Solid State Survivor, you can also hear a robotic voice saying, Tokyo. As you probably remember, throughout Solid State Scouter, you can hear a somewhat monotone and kind of robotic voice reading off power levels. This culminates with the voice reading off First Form Frieza's power level of 53,000, or 530,000. Well, in Technopolis, there's a robotic voice that can be heard spelling Technopolis, Technopolis. And then there's also the fact that Solid State Scouter very much sounds like something Yellow Magic Orchestra might release. Or at the very least, it sounds like something a Yellow Magic Orchestra tribute group might come up with. And then on top of all that, when you look up who performed this song, you see that it's credited as having been performed by the fictional music group Dragon Magic Orchestra. Yet another obvious YMO reference. So remember when I said that this song was kinda weird? Well, this is exactly what I'm talking about. When you put this all together, Solid State Scouter comes off as more of a YMO tribute song rather than the song that was created specifically as Bardock's theme. Yeah, there's definitely other songs within the Dragon Ball Z anime soundtrack that use synthesizers, but none of them really sound like this. Also, I can't think of a single other song within the Dragon Ball Z soundtracks that basically pays homage to a single music group to the level that this one does. So when I was thinking about this, it got me curious. And you know what happens when I get curious? I spend way too much time digging around the Japanese side of the internet trying to find some kind of explanation. And after a bit of searching, I found something. Kind of. Let me explain. What I found was a Japanese blog article written by someone going by the name Iguasu. As far as I can tell, Iguasu doesn't appear to be anybody famous. They're just someone who likes to write about anime and manga. And one of the articles on their blog happened to be about Solid State Scouter. In that article, Iguasu makes the rather bold claim that Solid State Scouter was never intended to be used as Bardock's theme. Instead, it was simply created as one more song that was released as part of the album Dragon Ball Z Hit Song Collection Volume 4 Character Special. However, according to Iguasu, Solid State Scouter was so good that Toei decided to use it in the Bardock TV special. As evidence of this, Iguasu presents the fact that Volume 4 of the Hit Song Collection series was released on October 1st, 1990. This is 16 days before the Bardock TV special aired on October 17th, 1990. Now, this is interesting. For around 16 days, people who listened to Solid State Scouter didn't immediately associate it with the Bardock TV special. As far as I'm aware, in the track list, Solid State Scouter wasn't listed as Solid State Scouter parentheses Bardock's theme. That being said, the fact that Solid State Scouter was released before the Bardock TV special aired doesn't prove anything. And sadly, Iguasu doesn't cite where they got this information from, and as far as I can tell, there don't appear to be any sources that back up Iguasu's claim. But is there anything here? Is it plausible for Solid State Scouter to have just been some random song like this that was intended for release on a music album that ended up being so good, Toei couldn't resist putting it in the anime? Well, yeah, I would say that it is plausible, but let's dig a little bit deeper here. First, I think it's important to understand just what the Dragon Ball Z Hit Song Collection album series is. So this is a series of 15 albums, and even though a small number of these songs on these albums were used in the Dragon Ball Z anime and movies, the vast majority weren't. That's because primarily what these albums are made up of is image songs. Image songs are basically songs that are inspired by a character or a situation, or sometimes even an item from an anime or manga. Most of the time, these image songs aren't even intended for use in the anime that they're based on. And that's why the vast majority of the songs found on the Dragon Ball Z Hit Song Collection albums were never used in the Dragon Ball Z anime or movies. Of course, there were exceptions though. For example, there's the infamous I Love You Mr. Piccolo song that was used in the World's Strongest movie. That song was released on Volume 3 of the Hit Song Collection series. Anyway, the point is that most of the songs on these albums are really random and often really wacky. For example, on Volume 4, the same volume on which Solid State Scouter was released, there's a song inspired by gathering energy for the genki dama. There's also a track featuring Kaio-sama or King Kai. In this track, Kaio-sama doesn't sing. No, he tells a bunch of bad jokes, he cracks up at his own jokes, and you can hear some other random people laughing at those jokes as well. And all the while, some music plays in the background. But perhaps my favorite track from Volume 4, aside from Solid State Scouter, is one involving Chichi and Gohan. So this one is kind of half a skit, half a song, and it involves Chichi and Gohan at a restaurant or a karaoke bar of some kind, and Chichi sounds like she's kind of drunk and she wants to go up and sing with Gohan, but Gohan is reluctant. He says, "Oh, I'm not good at singing," but then she eventually gets him to go up and sing with her, and so they sing this kind of love song duet. It's really cute, it's really funny, and if you haven't listened to these albums, I highly recommend you do, especially if you know some Japanese. Like I said, they're mostly really wacky, but there's some really fun and creative tracks on here as well that don't require Japanese knowledge. And that brings us back to Solid State Scouter. It really feels like whoever was working on Volume 4 of the Dragon Ball Z Hit Song Collection thought, oh, we need a song about Scouters. Let's get somebody to create a song about Scouters. And what they got ended up being really, really good. And of course, that's what Iguasu is claiming. It was so good that it ended up being used in the Bardock TV special. But again, just to be perfectly clear here, I'm just speculating. I can't confirm that this is how things played out. It's also totally possible that whoever was working on the track list for Volume 4 of the Hit Song Collection was thinking from the very beginning that if this song about Scouters ends up being really good, we'll throw it in the Bardock TV special. And by the way, I think it's important to mention here who composed Solid State Scouter. So Solid State Scouter was composed and arranged by Yasunori Iwasaki. Although he's not one of the more famous composers that's worked on Dragon Ball Z music, he has worked on several songs that were released on the Hit Song Collection albums. Aside from Solid State Scouter, perhaps the most famous or infamous track that he's credited as having worked on can be found in Volume 8 of the Hit Song Collection series. This song is called Bejīta-sama no O-ryōri Jigoku, which can be translated to something like Lord Vegeta's Cooking Hell. In this song, Vegeta can be heard arrogantly cooking. He is 100% Vegeta, except he's chopping up vegetables and threatening to blow them to smithereens. Meanwhile, the vegetables are singing back at him. This song is incredible. And in a way, because Vegeta finds himself in such a wacky and weird situation, you could almost say that this is Bingo Vegeta more than 20 years before Battle of Gods came out. Although Iwasaki would go on to work on many other projects, including doing quite a bit of music for One Piece, back in 1990, Iwasaki was still fairly new to the industry. If you look at his work, you see that 1990 is still very, very early in his career. So even though Iwasaki was clearly talented back in 1990, it does come off as just a little bit strange for so much responsibility to be thrown at him at such an early point in his career. Again, Solid State Scouter is basically the song of the Bardock TV special, so you would think that something as important as that wouldn't be entrusted to somebody who is, relatively speaking, still a rookie. So that does seem to give a little bit of support to Iguasu's claim that Solid State Scouter wasn't originally intended as the Bardock theme. Instead, it was just some random track that was going to be buried in Volume 4 of the Hit Song Collection. Unfortunately though, unless Iwasaki or somebody involved with the production of the Bardock TV special actually comes out and says something, or unless some long-lost magazine is found in which there's an article that talks about the creation of Solid State Scouter or something like that, we may never know the truth. But either way, what we can say for sure is 1. Solid State Scouter isn't just a Dragon Ball Z song, it's not just Bardock's theme, it's also a love letter to YMO. 2. Solid State Scouter is just an awesome song. And 3. Solid State Scouter is better than anything found in the Faulkner score. Boom! I gotcha, Faulkner fanboys. Come at me in the comments.